السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. All thanks and praise are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may His peace and blessings upon His last and final messenger, His family, His companions, and those who follow them until the end of times. Alhamdulillah, last week we explored the meanings and lessons of verses 66 to 71 of Surah Sad. So inshallah tonight we're going to go through and explore the meanings of verses 72 to 76, and we'll start off like we do every week by reciting the verses first. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذ قال ربك للملائكة إني خالق بشرا من طين فإذا سويته ونفخت فيه من روحي فقعوا له ساجدين فسجد الملائكة كلهم أجمعون إلا إبليس استكبر وكان من الكافرين قال يا إبليس ما منعك أن تسجد لما خلقت بيدي أستكبرت أم كنت من العالين قال أنا خير منه خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين قال فاخرج منها فإنك رجيم وإن عليك لعنتي إلى يوم الدين قال رب فأنظرني إلى يوم يبعثون قال فإنك من المنظرين إلى يوم الوقت المعلوم قال فبعزتك لأغوينهم أجمعين إلا عبادك منهم المخلصين قال فالحق والحق أقول لأملأن جهنم منك وممن تبعك منهم أجمعين. Just as a quick reminder, the surah has now transitioned into the story of Adam alayhi salam, the father of humanity, the father of mankind. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions the origin of mankind and what happened when He first brought Adam alayhi salam into existence. And as we covered last week, this portion of the story is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-A'raf, Surah Al-Hijr, Surah Al-Isra, Surah Al-Kahf, and here in Surah Sad. And the fact that this story is repeated throughout the Quran highlights its importance and significance. That this story of Adam alayhi salam is considered to be one of the most instructive stories in the Quran, giving us deep insight into the human condition and Satan's enmity. It contains a reminder for us that Shaitan, Iblis, is an old enemy who through his flattery and show of sympathy tricked Adam alayhi salam into committing an error. And one of the objectives behind repeating the story is to highlight the dangers of envy, pride, and jealousy. That these are considered to be some of the most destructive diseases of the heart. So through this story, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us and warning us about the negative effects, the negative consequences of having envy, of having pride and jealousy. Now these are the main two factors that led the people of Quraysh to oppose the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam started inviting his community towards the truth, when he started inviting them towards Islam, the two main reasons why they rejected the truth is because of their pride, their arrogance, and their envy. So this is repeated throughout the Quran to highlight the dangers of these two spiritual ailments. So in verse 71, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins the story by saying, إِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي خَالِقٌ بَشَرًا مِّن طِينٍ. Remember, O Prophet, when your Lord said to the angels, I'm going to create a human being from clay. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's speaking directly to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is instructing him to remember the story of the creation of the father of mankind and to remind his community of it as well. That remember, O Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when your Lord said to the angels, "Inni khaliqun basharan min tin," I'm going to create a human being from clay. And what is meant by clay here is a mixture of both dirt and water. And last week, we spent some time discussing the different ways in which this clay is described throughout the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. So when I have fashioned him and had a spirit of my own creation breathed into him, fall down in prostration to him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's continuing to describe the creation of Adam alayhi salam. When I have completed the creation of his physical form by shaping, fashioning, forming, and proportioning him, and have given him life, then fall down in prostration to him. فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ. When I have shaped him, when I have formed him, proportioned him, created him, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, and breathed from my spirit into him. This is an expression that is used to convey the meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought Adam alayhi salam to life. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is completely transcendent. And that is why this portion of the verse is understood figuratively. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He refers to the soul as my spirit, ruhi, as a means of honoring Adam alayhi salam. Because things are given honor, they are given respect through that which they are connected to. So, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, that I breathed into him from my ruh, from my spirit. Right? This spirit, the essence of it, the reality of it, is unknown to us as human beings. We have not yet reached that level of knowledge to uncover the reality, the essence, the truth of ar-ruh. But this is the substance that gives us as human beings life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He brought this physical form to life by blowing the spirit or the ruh into it. Now we don't know exactly how this took place or its exact nature because it is from the world of the unseen. What we do know is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought Adam alayhi salam to life. We also know that the human being is a combination of both body and soul, and that it is the soul that gives the physical body life. And the soul is described as a noble, heavenly, and holy substance that is subtle and luminous. Sayyid Qutb, rahimahullah, he eloquently writes, again, we do not know the nature of the sublime breathing of a soul into man, but we know its effects, which distinguished man from the rest of creation on earth. It distinguished him with the quality of aspiring to the sublime, with mind and spirit, which allowed him to look at past experiences and make future plans, and facilitated his spirit to go beyond what is received by his senses and understood by his mind, to reach to what neither the senses nor the mind can comprehend. This quality of aspiring to the sublime is unique to man, shared by no other living creature on earth. It never happened in the long history of the life of the earth that any species or any individual from any species made this leap, even when we accept that physical evolution occurs. Allah breathed of His soul into man because His will wished to place him in charge of the earth, managing its affairs within the limits He set so that He would build human life on it. Allah gave man the ability to gain higher knowledge. Ever since, man has risen higher whenever he is in contact with the source of his soul, deriving his values from there and maintaining a straight course. When he deviates from this source, the knowledge within him will be in discordance, unable to follow a coherent, progressive, and forward movement. In fact, these discordant trends will threaten his course and may lead to a setback in his human quality, pulling him down, even though his scientific knowledge and experience in some areas at least are well advanced. This creature of small stature, limited ability, short life duration, and basic knowledge could not have attained such honor except for this aspect of divine grace bestowed on him. Otherwise, what is man? He is this small, weak creature living on earth, alongside millions of other species. The earth is only a small satellite of a mere star, of which there are millions and millions in the great space of whose boundaries are known only to Allah. Who is this creature, man, before whom the angels are required to prostrate? It is because of this subtle yet great secret that man deserves his position of honor. When this is discarded, man goes back to his origin, the clay of the earth. So that's a very eloquent, beautiful passage highlighting the significance of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gave life to Adam alayhi salam by placing the soul in him. And it's this soul, this ruh, that gave Adam alayhi salam that status, that honor, that sharaf. And it's through that status, that honor, that sharaf, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded all of the angels in that gathering to do sajda before him. فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. So fall down before him in sajda. So after giving Adam alayhi salam life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed the angels and those present in that angelic gathering to prostrate before Adam alayhi salam as a sign of honor and respect. فَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ كُلُّهُمْ أَجْمَعُونَ إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ اسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. So the angels prostrated all together, except for Iblis, who acted arrogantly, becoming unfaithful. So all of the angels in that gathering submitted to the will and command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, falling in prostration altogether. Illa Iblis, except for Iblis, istakbara. He acted arrogantly with pride, and he refused to prostrate before Adam alayhi salam. And as a result of his jealousy, envy, arrogance, and pride, he became ungrateful. وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. The original meaning of the word kufr, the original meaning of the word kafara, it means to be ungrateful. It means to not express thanks and gratitude and appreciation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of the blessings that He's bestowing upon us. So by becoming arrogant, by filling himself up with pride, by being envious and jealous, he became ungrateful, and therefore he rejected Allah's direct command. He became unfaithful. And as we are going to cover, jealousy is one of the most destructive diseases of the heart that leads towards arrogance and pride. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قَالَ يَا إِبْلِيسِ مَا مَنَعَكَ أَن تَسْجُدَ لِمَا خَلَقْتُ بِيَدَيْنِ أَسْتَكْبَرْتَ أَمْ كُنْتَ مِنَ الْعَالِينَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks him. And obviously Allah already knows. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-alim. His knowledge is infinite, it's limitless, it's never ending. He already knows the reason why. But He's asking for us to understand. And He's asking to expose this fault. So قَالَ يَا إِبْلِيسِ, that, O Iblis, what prevented you from prostrating to what I created with my own hands? مَا مَنَعَكَ أَن تَسْجُدَ لِمَا خَلَقْتُ بِيَدَيْنِ. That what stopped you, what prevented you from bowing down and doing sajda to what I created with my own hands? أَسْتَكْبَرْتَ. Are you too proud? أَمْ كُنْتَ مِنَ الْعَالِينَ. Or are you too high and mighty? So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows why Iblis refused to do sajda before Adam alayhi salam. He's asking to expose and reveal his reasoning and intentions to us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks him directly, what prevented you from prostrating before Adam, whom I honored by creating with my own hands? Are you arrogant and proud, or do you think that you're too good? So he says, قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْ. He replied, I'm better than him. خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. You created me from fire, and you created him from clay. So Iblis, he explains his intentions and reasoning. That I'm better than Adam alayhi salam. I'm created from fire, and he's created from clay. And this is the essence, epitome, and crux of jealousy, envy, pride, and arrogance. Iblis was jealous. That why am I being commanded and instructed to do sajda before Adam alayhi salam? I'm better than him. He should be the one that's prostrating to me. And as I mentioned, pride, kibr, it's one of the most destructive diseases of the heart. It's a very, very harmful spiritual ailment. And A lot of the scholars, a lot of the ulama, they have spoken about kibr as a spiritual disease, and they have defined it and described it in several different ways. First and foremost, we have the definition of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he defined kibr as batrul haqq wa ghamtun nas. It's denial of the truth and dislike for others. So here, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's not necessarily defining the essence of kibr. He's not defining the mahiyah, like the nature of kibr. He's describing and defining the consequences. That when a person is full of pride, when a person is arrogant, they will deny the truth. They will reject it, even though they know it's right. They will deny it and reject it because they're too proud to accept it. وَغَمْتُ النَّاسِ, and it will lead to them disliking people. It will create hatred in their hearts for others. Another scholar defined it as حالة يتخصص بها الإنسان من إعجابه بنفسه وأن يرى نفسه أكبر من غيره. It's an internal state or condition when a person thinks good of themselves. They think highly of themselves. They admire themselves. And they consider themselves to be better than others. So إعجابه بنفسه. They have ujub. They have this self-admiration. That I'm amazing, I'm great, I'm handsome, I'm beautiful, I'm intelligent, I'm wise, I'm smart. They have this self-praise. And because of that, يَرَى نَفْسَهُ أَكْبَرَ مِنْ غَيْرِ. They consider themselves to be better than others. Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he defined it as استعظام النفس ورؤية قدرها فوق قدر الغير. Self-aggrandizement. I don't know how to say that word, but thinking yourself to be great. Right? You think you're amazing, you think you're awesome, and thinking that you're better than others. Someone else defined it as استعظام الإنسان نفسه واستحسان ما فيه من الفضائل والاستهانة بالناس واستصغارهم والترفع على من يجب التواضع له. When a person thinks highly of themselves, considers their qualities to be amazing, belittles others, and behaves arrogantly with one whom they should be humble with. And Imam al-Ghazali says, the reality of arrogance is that you see yourself as being superior to others in possessing attributes of perfection, such as beauty, knowledge, wisdom, intelligence. So there occurs in you haughtiness and a delightful sensation from this view and belief. Al-Kibr, arrogance, is basically thinking that we're better than others. That I consider myself to be better than someone else because of some quality I may possess. And this quality may be something that I had to nurture, cultivate, and develop, or it may be something that Allah has gifted me with. It could again be knowledge, wealth, lineage, race, color, power, strength, or language. And in the Ihya, and Imam al-Ghazali, he writes very beautifully that arrogance, pride, kibr is an extremely grave calamity. He describes it as a grave calamity, as a musibah. Through it, distinguished people are destroyed. Just like Iblis. Iblis was someone distinguished. He was someone honored. That he himself was not an angel. كَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Kahf, that Iblis was from the jinn. But because of his status, because of how much he used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was allowed to be in that angelic gathering. But because of his pride, because of his arrogance, he was destroyed. So through it, distinguished people are destroyed. Rarely are worshippers, ascetics, and scholars free from it, let alone normal people. So Al-Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, is saying that even people that are outwardly pious, individuals that seem to have taqwa, they're involved in worship, they pray, they fast, they give charity, they recite Quran. People who are ascetics, they're detached from the life of this world. Even scholars, people of ilm, people of knowledge, rarely are they free from it, let alone normal people. How can it not be a grave calamity when the Prophet ﷺ said, no one who has an atom's weight of arrogance in his heart will enter paradise. And that is a very, very severe warning from the Prophet ﷺ. That anyone with mithqalu dharra, anyone with the slightest, smallest amount of kibr in their heart will not enter into paradise. So it's a barrier in front of paradise because it separates between a person and all the characteristics of true believers. Those characteristics are the gates to Jannah, and arrogance closes all of those gates. Because a person who has arrogance is unable to love for the believer what they love for themselves. As the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. That none of you will truly believe until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. But if a person has kibr, they're unable to do so. An arrogant person is compelled to have all the blameworthy traits to protect his pride. There isn't a praiseworthy characteristic except that they're unable to adopt it out of fear of losing their honor. He also writes that arrogance bars you from the entirety of praiseworthy manners, because the proud person is not capable of loving for people what he loves for himself, nor is he capable of modesty or leaving disdain, envy, or anger. Likewise, he's incapable of concealing rage, giving good counsel, or leaving ostentation. On the whole, there does not remain any bad trait except that the arrogant person is compelled to perpetrate it, and there does not remain any good trait except that he is compelled to leave it. The most villainous and evil individuals throughout history were filled with arrogance and false pride. Iblis, Fir'aun, the enemies of the Prophet ﷺ, and every single tyrant throughout history, even in the modern era. Right? All of these despotic rulers, all of these dictators, all of these terrible world leaders, they are full of arrogance and pride. And perhaps that's why there are so many verses of the Quran. There are so many narrations from the Prophet ﷺ that condemn pride and arrogance. And the counter to kibr is tawadu'. The counter to pride and arrogance is humility. Man tawada'a lillah rafa'ahu Allah. As the Prophet ﷺ says, that whoever behaves with humility for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will elevate them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala poses this direct question to Iblis. That قَالَ يَا إِبْلِيسِ, O Iblis, مَا مَنَعَكَ أَن تَسْجُدَ لِمَا خَلَقْتُ بِيَدَيْهِ. What has stopped you, what has prevented you from prostrating, from bowing down to what I have created with my own hands? Right? أَسْتَكْبَرْتَ. Did you behave with pride and arrogance? أَمْ كُنْتَ مِنَ الْعَالِينَ. Or are you too much better than him? قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِنْ. So Iblis himself says, I am better than him. خَلَقْتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِنْ طِينٍ. That you created me from fire and you created him from clay. قَالَ فَخْرُجْ مِنْهَا فَإِنَّكَ رَجِيمٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately says, أُخْرُجْ مِنْهَا. Get out. Leave from here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expels him from the garden. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expels him from not only paradise, but that angelic gathering. فَإِنَّكَ رَجِيمٌ. Because you are cursed. You are going to be distanced from my mercy. وَإِنَّ عَلَيْكَ لَعْنَتِي إِلَى يَوْمِ الدِّينِ. And indeed, my la'na, my curse will be upon you until the day of recompense. That he is rajim, he is rejected. Right? Iblis has been rejected from that angelic gathering. He has been rejected and dejected from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on top of that, Allah's la'na will be upon him until the day of recompense. And the word la'na, it's translated as curse. But in Arabic it means being distanced, being kept far away from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قَالَ رَبِّ فَأَنظِرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. So then Iblis, he makes an appeal. Right? He asks for a particular favor. And it's interesting that he's acted with arrogance and pride. Right? He's refused to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has committed an act of kufr, but he still refers to him as Rabbi. Right? قَالَ رَبِّ, O my Lord. Right? O my Lord, فَأَنظِرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. Grant me respite. Grant me some time until the day mankind is resurrected. So Iblis did not want to be put to death at that moment. And he did not want to start being punished from that time. Rather, he said, grant me respite. Give me some time. Delay my demise. إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. Until the moment mankind is resurrected on the day of judgment. قَالَ فَإِنَّكَ مِنَ الْمُنْظَرِينَ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْوَقْتِ الْمَعْلُومِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His infinite divine wisdom, granted him his request. What is the wisdom behind that? Allahu A'lam. Allah is Al-Hakim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-wise. There is some deep divine wisdom why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed Iblis this time, this delay, this respite. And there's a reason why He allowed him to be who he is. Right? And He says, إِلَى يَوْمِ الْوَقْتِ الْمَعْلُومِ, that you will be given time, you'll be delayed, you'll be granted respite until the appointed known time, which is the end of this world. He will be allowed to remain alive until the moment this world comes to an end. So he wasn't granted his exact request. And that's something that the Mufassirun highlight. That his request was, allow me time until the day of resurrection, when people are brought up from their graves. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay, I'll give you time, but only until the world comes to an end. Right? Until the world comes to an end. قَالَ فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. He says, I take an oath by your izzah. I swear by your might, by your honor, لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. I will lead astray every single one of them. That I am the open sworn enemy. And this is highlighting again his envy, his jealousy, his bitterness, his pride. That he was so upset, he was so bitter, that he made it his life's mission to misguide as many human beings as possible. And that is Iblis's sole purpose in life. His aim, his goal, his mission is to take as many human beings as possible with him to hell. It's to take as many human beings as possible with him to eternal damnation. And he takes an oath by Allah's honor and power. قَالَ فَبِعِزَّتِكَ, that I swear by your izzah, your might, your honor, لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ, I will misguide أَجْمَعِينَ, all of mankind. إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ, except your chosen and selected ibad. So Iblis himself is giving us a hint on how we can protect ourselves from his misguidance. Right? The main method, the main way of protecting ourselves from being misguided and being led away by the tricks and plots and whispers of shaitan is by becoming true ibad of Allah. By becoming the sincere, devoted worshippers, slaves, servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through obedience, devotion, submission, worship. Obeying His commands, staying away from His prohibitions. That if we become ibad, we will be protected from being led astray and misguided by the plots, the tricks, the plans, and the whispers of shaitan. قَالَ فَالْحَقُّ وَالْحَقَّ أَقُولُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says that this is the absolute truth and I only speak the truth. لَأَمْلَأَنَّ جَهَنَّمَ مِنْكَ وَمِمَّنْ تَبِعَكَ مِنْهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. That I will fill Jahannam with you and those who follow you from amongst them, all of them. Right, that is the absolute truth, that is an ultimate truth of life. That in the hereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fill Jahannam with shaitan and those who followed in his footsteps. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from that. Right? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from his ibadak minhumul mukhlasin. Right? Those sincere, selected, chosen servants of Allah. So we'll stop here for tonight, inshallah. There's only 3 verses left, which we'll cover next Wednesday. So inshallah, next Wednesday, we will complete Surah Sad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this small effort of ours. May He place it on our scale of good deeds on the Day of Judgment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all of us among Ahlul Quran, الَّذِينَ هُمْ أَهْلُ اللَّهِ وَخَاصَتُهُ. May the Quran be a proof for us, not against us. May the Quran be an intercessor for us on the Day of Judgment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all of us among Ahlul Quran, الَّذِينَ هُمْ أَهْلُ اللَّهِ وَخَاصَتُهُ. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who not only recite the Quran but also understand it and try our best to follow it in our daily lives. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from pride and arrogance and fill our hearts with humility. وصل اللهم على نبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.